So Piotr, thanks for joining us. Yeah, we are looking forward to your talk. The Zoom is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Pavel. So let me start with sharing screen. Okay, so maybe first I share just a browser window with GitHub. So, okay, first, welcome everyone. And I would like to give a short introduction to creating game JavaScript. Ideally, it'd be the best if you could participate in a sense to try playing with this code so that to see if it works for you and if there are any questions or if there are things that don't work or if there are things you would like to try, so you can play with that and ask questions whenever available. I'll be also available on Discord later, but I think now it's like I'm fully focused, the thing. So there is a repository called Your First Quantum Game. If you've already created your quantum game or quantum games, then you can call it your second quantum game or anything. If you have a GitHub account, I encourage you to press fork. Fork, it means that you can copy the repository. For example, I can copy to my own private account. It means that it'd be possible for you to basically do anything with that and to play with this code any way you wish. Because it's not like a library that I will accept pull requests and change that, just it's like an example to start you off. And basically we have the same thing, and everything is here is MIT license, which means that basically you can basically do anything to that, including almost anything to that, but including creating own code, including releasing that, even including a paid game, as long as you share source. It's like auto ship, but even like you can turn it to closed repository at some point if you like, as long as you maintain previous version.
Piotr, sorry for interrupting. There's just one question on our chat. First of all, where can we run this code? Any IDE or editor?
Okay, so like when you say editor, like there's like maybe just let me go to Contemplatrap. A few recommendations. So the thing first, like you can see those code in GitHub, so you can even open it, see how it works. What's that inside? So if you want just to read it, it's fine. In principle, you can edit files there. I don't recommend that because it's like it's kind of it's not the most interactive way. I really recommend using Visual Studio Code. The editor I use personally for various projects, including in JavaScript, including in Python, including Rust. The good part about it is basically, it's easy to set it up. It's nice, and it has support of many things. So basically, if you want to have your own tools or if you want to use various libraries, usually you can benefit from that. For example, you can underline code that does not work, or you can automatically format your code, or it's very good when it comes to connecting to GitHub. So you can easily upload code to GitHub, easily download from it, easily check it. And it works on any platform, so be it Mac, Windows, or Linux. It's not the only code editor, of course. So like if you have your own preferred one, feel free to use that. Just is like the one I like the most. So this is like the editor. When it comes to starting, okay, it's like the trickier part is like again Git and GitHub. Here I won't introduce that because there are quite a few concepts, even though that's nice. If not, actually GitHub has some nice instructions how to set things up. So when you create an account, it will guide you through how to set it on your computer. Maybe it's like, let's leave it for later. So if you don't use that, just stick with the code, or you can actually also download code. So if you just, you don't have GitHub, you don't want to learn that, you can also download it and open your local folder. And unzip. And the thing is, and I will show like a few things, like one, how it's like to open locally. So basically, I'll just like only share one screen, the browser, because otherwise it's kind of tricky of playing it well with Zoom, because you have this whole fractal. Actually, it's kind of curious. If I share the whole screen on Zoom, will you see like also this like fractal of European of Zoom or not? So maybe just try to show it that way. If I show the full screen, so do you see my Zoom or not? I don't.
Sorry,
hear you.
I can see your Zoom up, so I can see on
just
the browser and folder.
Zoom up. But also, so can you see my Zoom up or not?
No, we can see the. I think we can see the browser.
Okay, great. Browser. So you see the browser, but also in the background you see these.
Yeah, we can see a code.
Yes. So great.
JavaScript.
Awesome. So basically, like when it comes to want to open that, so in this case, like this like repository, it's quite a few things. So quite a few places. Your first quantum game, and you want just to see open it. You can just open it, open. And I'm not sure if all browsers, but in most browsers it will work. So again, here you don't need any setup. It's also like I choose the JavaScript as an example because it does not take complex setup to get started, at least in the simplest way. And but before I can go to the code, there's like a few things because there were questions about where to learn JavaScript. So if you want to learn JavaScript, I recommend those two places. One is this HTML and JavaScript tutorials by Mozilla. There are quite a few materials introducing to JavaScript in general. And there's a beautiful book, Eloquent JavaScript, which is an introduction to JavaScript and also a bit to programming in general. But again, with really nice introductive examples. For example, I know we usually is that, maybe this one also that you can, maybe not here, maybe it's like some bottom. I don't remember which files, but in some places you can actually play with things. So like if I write the free and run it somewhere, run code. No, I think it's work. This you can get a result. So you see, like you can. It's an interactive course, so it's not like you need to believe that what's written is true, but just basically can place that, experiment how it works. And the next one, which is what is this repository? Lightrap and quantum testers for the previous one. Is that there are a few other materials. One is like my longer text on TypeScript, which is a version of JavaScript, just in my opinion, nicer to use. But again, if you just have your first step with JavaScript, I think just you can leave that. If you already know a bit of JavaScript, I think it's worth reading. When it comes to something a bit more general about games, there's a nice book, The Art of Game Design. It's not about JavaScript. It's not even about computer games. It's general about games and how to create an experience which is interesting for users, like players. What is a game? How to make it interesting? What matters? What does not? How to test it and use it? Because you can create anything, but in most cases it won't be nice. And I don't even talk about bugs. I talk about a gameplay which is like too simple or too hard or too complicated, or one which basically does not work for people. And there are a few other things. One is like my inspiration when I created quantum game photons. There were quite a few games which I basically may not base that on, but were clearly my inspiration. And games from SimCity to Clean Machines to Doom to basically quite a few things. And this is a list of collaborative games, which is a list of science-based games. And I collected with others, just if you want to have examples of games that based on science. About like physics, about biology, chemistry. For example, when it comes to physics, like there's a really nice game. I'm just curious if it still works. I think it's, yeah, it was like first in Flash. It was, I think, related to Unity, a game about special relativity. In this case, we see if it works. And yeah, so you can play game. As you see, it's like it does not look too serious. You have some dinosaurs running, and blah blah. And the thing is, for example, like in this game, you run a dinosaur. Now it's classical, but very soon it will become quantum. So just actually, maybe I go to levels. When you run, you change space, because in special relativity, depending on your velocity, the space changes. Some dimensions get contracted, also time changes, colors change, and well, there are quite a few interesting phenomena that happen. So in this case, it does not mean that if a game is serious when it comes to content, it does not be serious when it comes to style. But actually, I think it's very, very nice to match serious stuff with some very, very playable style. Of course, it's not. It can be opposite. It can be a game which like is themed when it comes to quantum, but it has no quantum mechanics at all. But when it comes to these hackathons, we care about games that do have some quantum elements, games that have some parts which are quantum. And there's like, oh, maybe there's one more, because of this like long list of games. If you think that something is hard to make a game, there's even a game about Vim. Vim is like a very hardcore text editor, and it's all about, to the point that you shouldn't use arrows to like move between characters, but some keys like K, H, L, J. It's a different mode, and it's a whole game about learning shortcuts to Vim. And what's important, it's not a game about like when you get some like points just for quiz. It's a game about using shortcuts from Vim to move, for example. And later you will use also such things when it comes to, I don't know, changing text so that you can teleport, so you can create some codes, or searching so you can teleport yourself to a place with this text. And I think if it's possible to create a game about learning shortcuts, which I think is in general boring as hell, then it's possible to create a game about anything. And when it comes to like, maybe it's like, it's not for now, but when it comes to JavaScript, is like, I will show like the simplest tool only in JavaScript, but there are various other ways to create games in JavaScript. One thing is using some framework. So basically not bare bones JavaScript, but something which does quite a few things for us. I won't show it right now because it has some setup. So you need to set a few tools to create environments, and on top of JavaScript, you need to learn a few things. I don't think it's hard, but still it's beyond scope. Because the frameworks I recommend a lot, Vue.js, which I think is the simplest framework, yet is very powerful. So you can basically do a lot of things, just from very simple ones to advanced stuff, if you want to use JavaScript, and like it comes with a nice style. There's Phaser.js, which is an engine, I think the most popular engine for creating games, JavaScript. Actually, I don't know that well, but it's like very popular during hackathons, because you can, there are quite a few tutorials. It's kind of, there's quite a few games when basically walk, jump, and this kind of action stuff. And it again does a lot of things for you. It also supports physics, but I will disappoint you, because the physics does not mean quantum physics, but physics like movement and jumping. So, but still, maybe it's something you want. Maybe it's you want to collect quantum states and jump from a platform to a platform. It all depends on you. But let's go to our games. Like if you fork that and you can play with that, you can also like open code. This is like I will show this thing with this editor this Visual Code, I always forgot, like it's the order, Visual Studio Code, not Code Studio, editor. And what do you have? Here we have a simple JavaScript file. If you know anything about, HTML5 with JavaScript, if you know anything about that, basically is head, about titles and other stuff, and the body, which is content. In this case, in head, we also want to import one library we created at Quantum Flight Lab, is quantum tensors, a library for quantum operations, so that you don't need to code by hand or operations when it comes to qubits, other quantum states, entanglement, quantum operators. So you can basically use things that are already there. And here is HTML, there are a few things. One thing is basically some constant things, for example, header, a simple game in one file, P is like paragraph, and here like it's ID, which like now is nothing, but we will use that IDs to basically modify its content, and a button. And the button also has ID, and also has an action. But on click, we do something, and a type. And this like on click is on button click is a function we run. We see how it goes. In this case, we start with importing things for quantum tensors you want. Like a link to this library and description. It's not well documented, unfortunately, but there's some documentation. There's some examples I link to. And also, if you have any questions about this library, I'm very, very happy to answer. Also, if even like to the point, like, can I do this operation? I can say yes or no. And like, if you said, oh, I want to do something, I can point you to some examples or how to do so, or how to add things to the library so to accomplish goals. And for example, and I try to make it in a way that it's easy to use. So in the sense that it's, if you create a quantum state, it's readable. So it's not like a huge table of numbers, you have no idea what's going on. Okay, you can also use these kind of structures, but mostly in a way that you can easily describe. For example, if I want to create a quantum state with some values, then I create a state which 0, 0, amplitude is complex number with real part 1, which is like, it's like, again, there's like 0, 1, complex part 1, 0, 1, 0, which is like first qubit 1, second 0, amplitude -1, and all ones, amplitude 1. And then to specify that it's qubits, not something different, like other particles, for example, energy levels 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. The 2 qubits. And later I normalize. In quantum mechanics, you want to have all normalized vectors. Again, if you like, you can forget about normalization and have, for example, things. He'll put 0.5, sorry, 0.5 everywhere, but I want to spare you this chore with basically keeping by hand if it's a normalized state. In quantum mechanics, you need to have normalized states because only then we know that probability is 1, and otherwise, like, things get complicated, usually for no good reason. And in this case, like with HTML, you want to be able to change content of those like paragraphs. Is like constant, like this display state. Let me just like zoom slightly. Display state and display entanglement. Constant means like it's constant, so we don't change that because like we know this idea of one element. And for example, like this one function, update viewer. So we turn our states with change HTML of this display state in the HTML to this state to get string. This is like we turn the function from state to generate, well, basically description, not description, but what's the state as a text. And display entanglement is something which we calculate entanglement of a given state and just display in a nice form of up to 3 digits after point. So it's, and this like, it's there are various versions of entanglement. This like is the simplest to calculate. And here, for example, we have 2 things. Like we need to say what state, and second thing we need to say how do you split? Because if you have more particles than 2, we always need to know how to split the system. For example, if you have 5 particles, you might want to say that it's like 0, 1. It means this entanglement between first 2 particles, so 0 and 1, and every other. But maybe like we can 0 and 3. So like means like entanglement between particles 0 and 3 and other particles. In this case, that particles which this thing makes sense. This thing is the same because the same split. But so it's a update viewer means like we, at this point update viewer to this initial state. But also like this is a button. So here actually it's not even a game, but we change this state. So like here like a console log, so like you see that this like some logs that we click button just for debugging to see if something works. Here we create a random number in JavaScript from 0 to 1, so that, for example, we can create either entanglement state or not. So in this game, we can think that okay, we try to show, we generate state entangled and not entangled, and allow player to guess which state is that. So if it's like it's below 0.50, it's like 50-50. We create 2 quantum states for 1 qubit, the other, and we combine them. There's something called outer product or tensor product, which means in general means that this state is not entanglement. When you can take 2 states and combine them in a naive way, it means it's not entangled because just we've measured one, it does not change the other. Other is fixed, and vice versa. Whereas like this another operator that creates a random state, which is of 2 qubits, and well, like it's not guaranteed it's entangled. Most multi-qubit states are entangled. So in this case, almost for sure, entanglement will be non-zero. Maybe huge, maybe small, but non-zero. And after this, like we update viewers, basically want to change. We want to see what we want to change the content of these fields. And let me show how it works. So let's have this CFI, simple, and we get something. So like this is a state. We start with this one I described. Entanglement is 1 because it's a maximum entangled state. For this value 1 for 2 qubits, it's maximum entangled. 0 is not entangled. And we generate. So is this state entangled or not? Any guesses? Maybe it's okay, super hard to, okay, it's like it's in this version, this game is super complicated. But if but here is entanglement 0, 0, 0. Is it entangled or not? Don't be shy, just make your guess, or type in comments or unmute and well. It's the browser, I suppose. Yes, so this like is not entangled, it's like 0 entanglement. Okay, I think it's another question. Okay, it's like it's a longer thing. For plugins, usually recommends what you want to install. There's some Git plugins, but like I can go to later about things I have installed and what it helps. So, and the generate state, again, not entangled, generate, oh, it's some entangled state. So it's entangled, not entangled, not entangled, actually pretty very entangled. And you can play with this generation state. Okay, it's like very entangled, not. Of course, if you want to make a game, instead of like, except for these, if you want to make a game, it's not enough just to generate those states. We want to be able to allow player to guess which one the state is that. So let's do that way. So add button, answer, entangled. And the other button, not entangled. Let's actually separate in this case. Product, actually in product, but and what, so it's like, okay, so the buttons, answer, I don't know, true, answer, false. And okay, so we need to create this function. And so okay, so let's create a function which is like answer, const answer, even, so it's this like is input, true or false in this case, and let's do that way. Let's do that. Okay, so like, but we need to do if entanglement of this state is bigger than, I don't know, like there are numerical errors, let's say this one. Yes, you're entangled actually. I use wrong suggestions, but I don't explain. Else, you are entangled. So, and let's see if it works. So let's go back to browser. So we need to reload that. Oh, no, it's like this is. Oh, sorry, I changed the wrong file. AAA, not simple. So this file. Let's go back to the browser. We just, so we added the two buttons and say, okay, entangled. But now we know this entangled. Even like we click like not entangled, you're untangled. So you can to I think more than it's, for example, that way, const let it's true or false. Sorry, guess, and entangled, and then later we can say maybe something different, like in entangled not, and then if entangled is your guess, then you are right. And if it's like you're incorrect, you're wrong. And let's see if it works. We go back to the browser. Again, to reset that. This, like we know, is entangled. Yes, you're right. Not entangled, you're wrong. This like is entangled. Yes, you're right. Not entangled, you're wrong. Right. Okay. This like is not entangled is correct, and the other is wrong. So, and for example, like in this case, maybe just okay, you're right, and you want to do something different. We also want to reset the state. So basically, in this case, we want to change something and put this code for regeneration. We can create a different function, but just since we do functions, let's put it here to see to generate state. And for example, you maybe don't care about this button anymore because we don't want to, or maybe you do. Then we see that each time also get a new state that say entangled, you're right, new state, entangled, yes, entangled actually is wrong, not entangled, you're wrong. And maybe just we want to, in this case, remove these, you're entangled, but administrate because we already have something. But at the same time, we may want to add score. Store and runs. And in this case, like we want to have variable that we can change, we need to say that let score 0, let runs 0. And for example, then in this case, if you are right, we can want to add one score. So that way, I prefer it's actually slightly different, but it's like whatever you prefer. Here we don't add score, but in both cases, we can, I think, like after that, say runs. Now we want to update slightly different things. So if we don't, we want to also update those scores. So maybe just use the pattern, but basically you need to create display score. Can be the score. And the same way we can display runs. To see if we can modify that. And again, this in this case, HTML is okay. There are a few ways to go. For example, we can, except for this just score, this a nice thing in JavaScript that we can have these templates, which means like this different quotation marks that like its value and like text, just to easily combine text with other parts and runs. And just we see how it works. Okay, so we have score and runs, and say that entangled. Okay, right? Score and runs, not entangled. You're right. And it's like, okay, a wrong guess. Entangled. So you see, oh, actually, it does not change runs. Strange. It should change. I don't know why. Not entangled. Okay, I think I know what's wrong, because like here it displayed a wrong thing. So now it should be correct. So like it was displayed not correct. Entangled, yes. And say like entangled also. So you see like this score doesn't go. And then depending on that, of course, we can play with, for example, win conditions, that if we reach given score, we win, or if we reach given score, we don't reach given score with like same 10 runs, we lose. What you can do different. Okay, so also like another thing we can do is we can make it simpler, because as you see, like it's hard. To be honest, I wouldn't guess myself if this state is entangled or not. Myself, it's like it's very hard for us to see if two things are products or of two operations. So let's make it slightly simpler. Let's, for example, say that we don't generate in that complicated way, but we do something simple, that we only consider states with the same values. So for each 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, all values are the same up to sign. How to do so? Well, there are a few approaches. In this case, we say that it's random free, which is in this case No, it's like some auto completion, but say in this case we const not random. Actually, you can do it 5 interesting ways. But say if, then we return -1. Or actually, maybe complex -1. Let's do complex. Else if next it's like return 0, say, and the other option is else return 1. And for example, in this case, like, so this function which returns random. And also, like, before, like, maybe just go further, like with putting in comp with everything, let's do something inspect. You say inspect, you can play with this code, see what's going on. For example, you can see what's head, what's all content, where is it located, what are the current values. So like if you play something, what's the current quantity slide, what changed. So we can kind of inspect what's going on. But also this console. In console, we can do anything we wish. We can add 2 numbers just to see what's going on in JavaScript. But also I can say random 3 to see what it does. You see, it generates randomly one of 3 possible complex numbers. So if you want to play with some code interactively, it's an easy way to do so with this console. I very often do that, especially when I write a new function, because it's much easier to see if something broken here rather than when something doesn't work. So I have no idea is the problem with this function or other function, or maybe everything was fine, but it doesn't display properly. So in this case, let's say that instead of doing this thing that way, so maybe just we can actually comment. Okay, there are a few ways to go. Okay, maybe let's do that way here. Well, it's like, what's the chance that something? Maybe there are a few ways. Maybe it doesn't need to be 50-50. But let's say that here we create new state in a slightly different way. State, but here, so it's like, yes, all possibilities. But instead of like fixed things, like we say like, okay, I want random values. It won't be correct yet, and I'll show you why. So yeah, I can reload. Okay, so entangled. Say we are right. And this state, I think it didn't save a reload. Good question. Why it doesn't work as I wanted? It should. To this, I don't know. Where do you generate? Oh, I see. Oh, yeah. So I can dump. So it's the thing is not only here, but actually here I generate state. So it's like it was my bad because like this previous function for generating random, but I don't care. So here I generate and we see how it goes. So entangled, yes. And you have some values there. Though it's like -2, it's not correct. It's not correct value. Why? Well, because in this case, we have things which are not normalized, and we need to normalize things. And so it's like here also we need to add one line to normalize. So to make sure that this vector adds to 1, Otherwise, okay, so this has 1, so squares of those has 1, it's fine. Yes, yeah, sorry, I need to. And then we are okay. If things be correct, and again, like this is like one here, the other. We might think like how to remove zeros, but let's for now let's stay there. And maybe like it's one more simpler thing. So let's use addition notation for printing states. I think it's like the cat string. I think it's Cartesian. But though we need to go to documentation to make sure it's fine. Yes. So in this case, we just write states in a way they are. So in this case, okay, it's entangled. So it's entangled. It's like the first. Then the second is also entangled because it's impossible to decompose that in pieces. Also entangled. Everything is entangled. I know, just kind of strange. This is like fully entangled. Entangled. This is not entangled because, for example, there's like only one state here, and it's well, it's one state, one. It's not entangled. Though, as you see, like in most cases, it's also not entangled. It's only 2 in places, but okay, this state okay is not entangled, but because even there are 2 places, it's like in one case it's 1 0 and 1 1, and this state can be decomposed as states which is one is 1 just 1, and the second is 0 minus 0 plus 1. Oh, sorry, minus 0 and minus 1. So those states that you can decompose. But again, here the point is not to make in this point to make it simpler, because as you might notice, like it's not the most visually appealing, it's not the simplest one, just to show how it's possible to create various parts with JavaScript. And let's say, okay, we want this game to show the public one or the other reason. We maybe polish that, maybe we change how we generate those states, so it's like they look nicer. Maybe we do something different with them. Maybe just we even don't show the state because our game does not involve showing the state, but involving looking at other properties. So in here, like we need to add. So maybe just sorry, just the simple a game update. With each commit, like we need to say which kinds we want to add. And add. So it's like it's timestamp for Git. So it's like, okay, we want to put a stamp on this code, and then git push, which means that we put this in the repository. And why it's important, because then we can see that online. I think that sometimes like there's some delay, sometimes actually to do some other commit, because sometimes it's delayed only like the next commit. So I see update. So some things are not perfect, unfortunately. We see how it goes. So it's some delay what happens on the website, but okay, you see, it's a website. It's not something which is only locally. Now we can distribute that valuing and show you others. And the same thing that is here is which we had on our computer is right now is on our website. In this case, also, like if you need to look at, you want to make it also maybe kind of easy for you to develop, maybe even on a single file, you can use 2 files. It was that way that one file is just HTML, the other is HTML plus just you link to a script use, just a local file. And then in this local file, you only put JavaScript. Except for those pieces like of this HTML and JavaScript, you can also use CSS, which means Cascade Style Sheets, to make this thing nicer. For example, to change the style of buttons, to add some colors, to add other things that make it more pleasant as a game. Though, as when it comes to my opinion, when it comes to games, first it's good to think about the idea and even play with pen and paper or with paper blocks to see if it makes sense at all. Then code is like the simplest version, and only then think about style. So unless you main thing game style, and your main is the mood, and you don't care nearly much about mechanics, because there are some games and they're beautiful. Very often it's players will forgive you a lot when it comes to all other details and all other parts of the game, as long as the game is interesting and people get hooked in, to the point that there were quite a few games with not the best graphics, or the games which crashed very often, but at the same time people kept playing that. So even like simplest games like Tetris, like I don't know, maybe Snake, maybe now they are not as popular, but for decades they were very popular just because this mechanics was kind of interesting. Or maybe the small games like chess. It's not like chess, it's like 3D game with visual graphics, but it's something that people have been playing for centuries, if not longer. So it's like, so in this case, like just I want to, again, if to learn JavaScript syntax, like it takes some time, it's not that hard, at least for the simple stuff. Just make sure to look at some modern guides to JavaScript, because like some previous versions of JavaScript were pretty much, well, maybe fucked up is like a strong word, but yes, but like I would use that. And also right now with these editors, you have a lot of things which are basically colored, so it's much easier to follow code. It's much easier to see what's going on step by step. And when it comes to JavaScript, it's easy to both to test it, like to at least to inspect that code locally, see what's going on, both how does it change elements, and in console, what you see. And for example, you can add console log to, so maybe just wait to put that. Maybe just let's say that we don't want to alerts, but a console log, because like alert is too big first for us. Then actually again we need to go to our local file, because we didn't update the local one yet, just this local file in my computer. And it's like entangled, and you see that the console, like the private thing, you see what's going on. So it's very, very good to debugging, for debugging, to see if we are able to see messages. They can be text, can be numerical, can be about errors, they can be about things that happen, to make sure that we can know what's going on. And how we inform our things with our player, it depends. Here maybe just I want to show it's show also something slightly different, which goes beyond the scope of this talk, but what we can say do with view. And then I will go to questions, so you can ask me questions how to modify things or how to play with that. I think there's like your first game view or something. Yes, CD game view. This is like this. I think it should go with yarn. Like yarn serve or things like that. So again, it's kind of more complicated because it's not like you can just open file. At the same time, those things like if you does a lot of things, and here like this, it's okay to open skin port. And like this, I won't give an instruction to view, but in this case, it's kind of similar thing, but in which I can also both show in the previous way, but also it's also some nicer default styles. I can use other libraries so that it's possible to present states in a nicer way. And it's kind of easier to combine JavaScript with, HTML, because it's exactly frameworks are exactly libraries to make it easy to develop websites. So you don't need to manually map elements, HTML elements to code and manually change that, but there are some built-in things. Maybe actually I can show code somewhere. more or less how does it look like. Again, there's some tutorials to Vue, and I think they're also nice. Okay, Vue, it's like I didn't show it online because it's kind of maybe not ideal. There's a lot of files, but not ones you need to create. Just like, but for example, like this in Vue works more that way. That is some whole app. Close others. And you have like some basically, you can see that the whole files basically you can compose of these pieces that you have the image, some parts of application, and you can develop parts of our application in separate files. So for example, this untangled dot, so more or less what you had is in a separate file, and already we don't need to manually see like create IDs of elements, but basically say in code that we want to print this variable and always update this variable. Or in a bracketed, for example, like it's, I think the similar thing, but also we also use some other elements, cat viewer, to have a much nicer view of those entanglement states. And here, like this gives some tutorials when it comes to how to use Vue. So if you know a bit of JavaScript, because here, like I think it's nicer, it's easier when you know a bit of JavaScript, I recommend trying some framework, be it Vue.js, or like it's more like text-based game, or like very simple one, a logic game. If it's something like running, jumping, perhaps this Fraser.js. But basically, under the hood, like JavaScript, like is the same. And when it comes to these quantum tensors, it's the same library which you can use for tensor operations, for quantum operations. And like if you want to have some taste of this quantum JS, for example, there are some operations for various things, including operations for, I think to make it wider so you see help, from vectors to operators to systems like photons, entanglement, and for example, circuits. You can have computing circuits which you are able to create, say, various gates. For example, create a given number of qubits and add various typical quantum computing gates on a given qubit and then measure the system. So if you want to use quantum computing, also it's like you can do that, use it with JavaScript because you don't need to create everything from scratch. There are quite a few things you can already use. When it comes to like visualization, there's like one other library that we're developing, which is bracket view, which is kind of, I think, would be slightly harder to use with plain JavaScript, but it's much easier to use with Vue.js, which is a library precisely to create, present quantum states and quantum operators in a nice way, in a way that it's much easier to display, it's much easier to interact with. For example, there are operators, you can play with that, you can create interesting experience. I don't know if I link to some of the things, but well, there are some interesting experiences when you can play with quantum computing or other quantum operations, like quantum teleportation, using those kind of visualizations. And okay, so, and when it comes to this direction, I think like I showed you what I wanted to show, and then now there's space for your questions. Maybe I will go back to the previous repository, and I'm very, very happy to answer your questions about anything related to game development in general, game development in JavaScript, other frameworks, editors, Git, or anything you basically would like to know about. Well, that would be helpful for hackathon. So it's like, so make it, well, so you can ask on chat. I think it's even better if you just unmute and ask a question, well, with voice, but it's basically up to you.
Right. Are there any questions? No questions as for now. So Piotr, can we go on?
Well, it's more or less like it's there.
Oh yeah, there
like
was one question. There was one question from Antonio.
Okay, so against the stuff I wanted to go through, I went through that. Because
Great.
again, like other things, like a bit, again, for some people it's boring because they know all the parts. For some people will be too fast because, well, it's like too many functions in JavaScript. So just wanted to show the taste of writing code in JavaScript. And you can also download that and play with the code by yourself now or later. But because the questions, okay, when it goes to interactive inputs, so basically there are a few ways to go. Like the easiest one is when it comes to this framework Vue.js, because basically it does it for you. When it comes to HTML, one of easy input things is like buttons. You can have buttons and click there. You can create also other objects that you click there or mouse over them, you get one action. So it doesn't necessarily click, maybe something different. There is also, when it comes to like input text, like it's, you can select Google for JavaScript input. And there are various fields, examples of input text objects. And I was like, which you want to read now? But basically, like input object. And you have like, you can create objects that you can input text. Also, you can basically have a function that looks at its value. So if you want to have text, it's perfectly fine. You're welcome. So then maybe a question to you. Do you have some idea for your quantum game? So like, do you have some idea what do you want to do? Even like, is your first idea? And then like, I'd be happy to help you just to say what are the tools you can use, or what would be simple to code in JavaScript, would be like rather hard. Because in principle, you can do anything. In principle, there are libraries to do, say, 3D things, JavaScript, like beautiful, like very, very fast. There are tools also, but like it's something like it's much harder to start. There are things to even create experiences in VR. Even like create one experience which is about looking for a 3D fractal from the from its center. It's kind of interesting just to see like how it works. But again, also do simple that way that just creating JavaScript code, then on a VR headset was enough to basically open this website, and well, it worked. So it's much easier than create some things, release it on, I don't know, like some store. What like this is hard, and this thing is easy. So when it comes to card games, like there are various card games, like, but when it comes to like some typical card games, also like you can create just a list of cards, and then, for example, I don't know, just with clicks you can put a card on the table, you can draw them, you can just create in signs. Like I think the simplest demo would be starting from creating cards using UTF-8 card. You can use various, and this one is, there are some codes for various cards. For example, this is kind of interesting because you don't need to use special graphics. You can use typical things from this like font encoding, because there are quite a few symbols, and of course, and it does include symbols for quite a few things, including for cards, or for the mini blocks, or for dice, and other things there. Actually, I think my phone does not support this one, but as you see, it supports quite a few other things. And again, you can have actions on click, you can have some actions on that. When it comes to like, sometimes when it comes to various games, sometimes it's easy to turn them quantum, sometimes not. So I don't know, like, if there's a general good suggestion what to do. It's possible to create, to turn something easily to quantum. But for example, it might be interesting just to have that, you know, that you have, I don't know, entangled cards with your with the other player, and depending on measurement, either you end with, like in bridge, like for example, and you end up with one card and your other player with another card. This is one possibility. Another interesting thing is like this, like one card game, it's not like typical cards, but something different, called Arcana or something like Shipwreckage. I don't know. I need to like card game. Arcana Shipwreck. I think this one is that maybe this one. Yes, this one. It's kind of like a logic game in which basically you have a card and you have some numbers, and there are some rules that, for example, you can put a card on this field if it's like 1, 2, or 3, or you can put your number on this field, but only if it's smaller than all other numbers. So these kind of like conditions, and usually there are a few choices, but you know, want to play somehow that, you know, just your opponents don't know what you did. And those kind of logic games, I think, are interesting for quantum, because I think there's a lot of possibilities. For example, you want to put one state, but one state which is not entangled, particularly, but which is not entangled with others, or you need to put a state which is orthogonal to others, or it's like not orthogonal to some, or that you can put one state, but as long as, I don't know, as long as well, it's, I think it's mostly about orthogonality or not orthogonality. But I think there's some way to go. There's some, I think, ideas with memory on these kind of games when you unravel things on board and check if it goes, or maybe like some quantum Tetris, when you put 2 blocks and you you don't know which one is, or maybe even better, that you have some operations that turn one block into another. So you have some interoperations that, and those like blocks in Tetris are some quantum states. So I think that there's a lot of room to play around that. Yes, like some card games make sense. Those kind of, I think, like it's like one remark is like it works much better if the games is not too complicated, because quantum things are complicated. So maybe just the example just I showed you is like, it's, yes, maybe too complicated for the beginning, but still just to have it, at least the first levels, to have it really simple. So for example, like actually, if I actually wanted to create this kind of game with entangled states, I would start from very simple states. I would start from and start for showing that, okay, this is entangled because it can be decomposed in a given state, or it's not entangled because, sorry, it's not entangled, or it's entangled because it cannot be decomposed in 2 states, but it's like it's a combination of 2 states that are entangled, like 2 pairs of states entangled. So it's like there's some procedure for some rules for that. Or maybe like this, I was like, there's some ideas of games about, you know, creating event states with circuits. You want to create event state, or other way, you want to unentangled state with some circuits. So we have entangled state, you want to unentangle it. So why not? So you have like braids, but you want to unbraid that to create a state which is not entangled. Yeah, so like also, like as you said, that Antonio has to say that it's yes, only a week. So it's, I think it's the best not to have some idea about 3D game with shooter, RPG, quantum, I don't know, multiplayer, but something super simple, something working in the first, like, not first or second day, and then testing that, polishing that, so that still there's something small, but something playable. Because like, what's the saddest when you have a great idea and you approach it for a few sites, but it ends up that, well, you end up with nothing because there are too many ideas and, well, none of them worked. Or like, it almost worked, but there is some bug in the code. And debugging is, as we know, sometimes hard and annoying. So, are there any other questions? Because I think like Antonio is like very active. So if you have any questions or like it's anything, just it's like, let me know. And if you, again, if not here, that it can be on chat. And because like maybe one thing like of simple games, not quantum games. There's a game called Game 2048, something like that. I know, so it's like a super simple game that basically now you move things and get some numbers. And again, this mechanism is super simple, super simple. So it's not hard game when it comes to mechanics, but still is playable. So again, the goal is not to create something which is as hard as possible. The goal is to create something fun, and fun does not equal hard. And it's very good because again, it also means that it does not need to be PhD in physics or game development to create something interesting. Actually, I'm not good at this game, so I guess it won't take me. It's like I guess won't survive that long. Okay, so I think like okay. Oh, it's like another question. Do you think a fully functional demo of a card game with text-based cards would be better than aesthetically pleasing game with less features? I'm working alone. I do not know if I can create something beautiful, but I have a good idea for how the card game will work. So depends. So like I don't think like it's number of features matters. I think like it's much better to have a simple game with not many features, but which is fun and addictive, or like otherwise like nice. And I think the best way is to go to something very simple, like text-based, as the simplest thing you can think about, and then go from that. Then if you can develop interesting graphics, maybe it's better. Maybe it's like simply dynamics plus something beautiful. Maybe it's you can start from something only stick with text-based, but add thing by thing. There's some games like I didn't play that paperclip. Some pure paperclip game. And some paper clips. So these kind of games that you create paper clips, make paper clips. Again, as you see, this is a game that if you just clone the repository, you'll be able to create this kind of game. Okay, paper clips, and you can, I don't know, just you can price per clip. I don't know, just you can sell them. And you have like some games about that, which automatically changes things, and then because to business, you get money, and when you get more money, you can buy marketing, and you can create factories and everything. And then again, this like is auto clippers. Oh, nice. So automatically create clips. So this is some kind of stuff that, again, is super simple because the interface, yet interesting. At the same time, there's some beautiful games which basically do not have that much mechanics, but they're beautiful, a beautiful sound, and just more like meditative games when you look at them. So it's again kind of up to you. chess and Go. Well, it's like chess is kind of, it's not hard, but hard to learn because there are more rules. With Go, I think the only hard thing is not super hard, but I need to think about is about how to how to decide when something is surrounded. But adding things is simple, but it doesn't take that much code to see if a given figure is surrounded. Maybe quantum Go makes sense. Like, can make it interesting because, for example, maybe it's possible to also create some operators. Like, so you add some entangled states, but someone, or like qubits, but someone can apply operation on the whole board. So, for example, like to changing things. So now it's like a very good configuration, but some other operation that turned things upside down. So, any other questions here?
Okay, I don't see more questions on our chat.
Okay.
So I think we can finish, Piotr. So
Yes,
it's fine. We can finish earlier. No worries.
Yeah, so like this up to 2 hours. So just depending on
So,
questions.
Yeah. Do you think that you will be also available on our Discord later, just in case?
Yes, like so on Discord, like just it's like I won't always answer immediately, but just I think the best way is just ping me. So just if there's a question strictly to me, if something different, not. And I'm very happy to answer questions mostly about these quantum tensors. Like these I know the most. Some questions about games, but like it's not like I'm a serious game developer. Just like I created a few games for fun rather than on hackathons, other pieces. And some questions about JavaScript. But again, it's depends mostly about tools. Because when it comes to tutorials, it's much better just to find a good tutorial about a given tool. But if you have a question, which tool to use if I want to create a VR game about something, then also I think I can come with a few recommendations.
All right, thank you. So I think we can finish this session. So let me stop recording.